But yeah, we're going to be looking at 2025, those potential breakout candidates. Yeah, you like that? Scheme trends, changes. Let's just jump right into it. We'll go one each. We do not know what each other's things are. So we'll go from there. Matt, start us off. What is your first thing that you think will be a thing in 2025?
Yeah, sticking with the tight theme that we're starting off with here today, I think condensed formations on offense is going to be a big talking point throughout the league this year, and this is for a couple of reasons. Look, yeah, right. Now this makes more sense what I was asking you about prior to the show today. But no, so this has been on my mind a lot. And look, I'm not sitting here saying like, "Ooh, here, let me tell you something about some revolutionary thing you've never heard of before." Condensed formations. I'm not trying to say I'm breaking anything down here that's all that advanced, but I think it's going to become less of like a niche football nerd, 301 talking point. And I think it's going to become more of a mainstream talking point this year, because this is something that I have been kind of obsessing about, honestly, ever since Ben Johnson got hired by the Chicago Bears. And, sort of the thought of who is going to be the Amon-Ra St. Brown role in this offense. And the thing that I've kind of pushed back on is that role has like changed. It's moved over the years because the formations in this offense are super, super tight. They are a lot. I mean, league wide, they're one of the low, thanks to Nate Tice, I know this, one of the lowest average formation lengths across the league. And that sort of blurs the lines of like who's the slot and who's the outside receiver. Because if you just look at like the Lions last year, Amon-Ra St. Brown took 44% of his snaps in the slot. Jameson Williams was at 30%. Like there's not this giant gap of who is getting the layup looks in the offense. And I think there are other teams that this is worth talking about too, like Seattle going from one of the widest formation lengths in the NFL under Ryan Grubb to now a much more condensed offense with Kubiak there. That's going to make like, is Jackson Smith-Njigba or Cooper Kupp the slot receiver? That makes it matter a lot less. So this is actually something I wouldn't say I'm having like an existential crisis about this, but because in the way that I've charted receivers since 2014, it's just been like, are you outside? Are you on the line of scrimmage? Are you slot? Are you off the line of scrimmage, et cetera, et cetera. But, watching the Rams, the Rams offense with Puka Nacua recently, because that's what I've been working on for reception perception, just how like we've blurred the lines between who is an outside receiver, like who's a slot receiver so much with some of these offenses. And the fact that, again, back to Ben Johnson, like that has become, that tree is now proliferating across the league, I think is only going to make this more pertinent because, yeah, we've seen like the Shanahan McVay offenses, those kind of go across the league and these formations getting more and more condensed. Now that Ben Johnson's also like that tree is moving around, the Detroit Lions tree is moving around, I think it's only going to create more teams that are operating their offenses this way. So I think this will be a big talking point throughout the course of this football season when we're looking at offenses across the league.
We talked about the Seahawks. They've been kind of like a nice off-season topic for us. And you brought that up about them, like, oh, the Cooper Kupp JSN stuff about like, well, they're condensed. So that actually kind of allows them both to be kind of slot players. And I was like, it's a great point. Like that, I hadn't really sparked in my mind, but it makes sense in the Kubiak offense. And honestly, you look in the last 5 years, I can look, as you were talking, because now I know what your point is with this, the formations are getting tighter and tighter every single season. Just going back from 2020, it was average formation width in the NFL is 25.8. This is all from Next Gen Stats, 25.8 yards. Then it went to 25.4 yards in 2021. Then 24.6 in 22, 24.6 in 23. And then last year, it dropped a full yard to 23.6. So it's gone down almost 2 yards on average throughout the week. So yeah, this is definitely a thing that's been trending. And honestly, something I wish I included in my article that I'm writing about the scheme trends, because this is a great point. What you're saying with the line, the roles blurring. What is a receiver? What is a tight end? Even too, the Rams are the team that just comes to mind for me the most. But the merger of roles and it's a pass catcher, as opposed to just receiver, just tight end. They're pass catchers, but they can be used in different ways because teams are getting more creative with how they move guys around. I actually have a point that's kind of associated with this, but I'll save it for a minute. But any thoughts on this one, Charles, or anything that you see? I know the Falcons love their condensed splits as well. And I'm sure it's unlocked guys like Drake London.
Yeah. I've been curious to see, like, I guess what the defensive adjustment is going to be to this, because it's kind of it to me. I guess you can kind of end up in a role where or in a world where we kind of found ourselves in maybe with play action and motion stuff where, well, if everyone's doing it, then it's a little less valuable inherently. Like, that's just how math works. If everyone's doing it, it's less valuable. So what is the comeback that defenses are going to try just to try and get offenses out of some of these looks? Like, I think the hard part when you're a defense is when they're condensed, obviously there's just so much more space to run to, and you can pick your spots a little bit better. Whereas everyone's spread out, then, and if the quarterback's dropping back for 3 seconds, a receiver can only run so far in that amount of time. So I think it maybe is a little bit easier to defend, which is why we're seeing teams go to condensed formations. But if everyone's doing it, then someone's going to figure out a solve or fix for it. That's going to force the spread teams back out a little bit. And I just want to see what that trend might be. I'm not sure what it is, because it seems like all these offensive coordinators are getting really, really good at this, and they're all the best ones are using condensed formations, and they're shredding for the most part. But some smart little boy genius out there is going to figure it out, and I'm curious to see what that changes.
My one bet I have, God, now I wish I had these numbers, corner blitzes. See more and more corner blitzes. That's why Spags destroys Shanahan offenses. Like, that's why he's so good again, because he's like, first down, corner blitz. Second down, it's another corner blitz. It's third down, corner blitz. He'll do it on every down. I think, and it's something, and I'm not writing about it, but it's something I noticed a lot watching college football last year when I was studying prospects. Corners are in the run game so much because of what offenses are doing. So like corner tackling has become a huge thing, and corner blitzes and stuff. So like, yeah, corner play might be the answer to this, I guess. Like getting their hands dirty on top of the coverage stuff they have to do.
Yeah. Witherspoon in Seattle. I mean, that's a good one to point out when we're talking about two of these teams are Niners and Rams that are the lowest average formation. Like, yeah, he's a critical part of that. If that Seahawks defense can continue its momentum from last year.
Great point. All right, moving on. Charles, what was your first point or first thing that you think will be a thing?
I think the Panthers, and okay, this is kind of like cheating a little bit because they were so bad on defense last year, but I looked back at kind of their offseason and guys have been getting back from injury, and I'm like, if we're still in on this Avero thing, Ejiro Avero, the defensive coordinator, this is a lot better room that he's working with than what he had last year. So obviously you're going to get Derek Brown back, which, man, once he died last year, or not died, once he blew his knee out last year.
But all-pro caliber player. Like,
all-pro caliber player. And it became very apparent that was the only all-pro caliber player that they had that was consistently healthy, because they got railroaded for 13, 14 straight games. I think they figured out a little bit towards the back end. But I'm just kind of fascinated to see what steps they take, because you're in a situation where it's just hard to be worse than last year. They had a pretty interesting draft. They added both Nick Gordon and Princely Umanlian from Ole Miss. They went into the free agency. They got Bobby Brown and Deshaun Wharton along the defensive line. So they came in with a role, or with a very clear vision, I think, of like, holy crap, what happened last year up front for us, which is totally unacceptable. And maybe they view it as a talent thing, but I'm sure there's ways that Rivera could help them start moving in the right direction again. So I just kind of want to see a defense that was really bad last year is going to be relying on a lot of rookies and not undrafted free agents, but unrestricted free agents that they signed in March. I just want to see how quickly they can kind of bring that together, because when you start looking at offensive line and the run game, they added Ted McMillan. I think it's fair for, if you're a Panthers fan, to kind of expect something out of this team this year based on all the pieces that they've added over the past few years. And Bryce Young played better. And I think one thing that we really saw last year was Dave Canales kind of has the juice as a play caller a little bit. He did start to figure that out by the end of the season. So I'm interested to see if they can if their additions, I guess, are enough for them to get to like league average defense, and what that can potentially do for their chances of winning more than 2 games this year.
A good goal for them is like top 18 on offense and defense. Around average on offense and defense. I think that's a good year for them. Does that? Yeah. Who knows in the NFC South?
Right. Dude, they spent a lot more than I remember when I was looking back at it, because they also signed Trevon Moehrig from the Raiders,
Yes.
and they gave J.C. Horn that big extension this year too. So, like when you add this many people plus 2 second-round picks on defense, I'm a little interested just to see how it all works together. And it's been interesting to see that Evero has not left Carolina through all of this. I'm sure playing, coaching some pretty bad defenses recently is going to leave him stuck there. But he's stayed on through multiple staffs, and Canales hasn't fired him yet. So I'm interested to see just what happens next for them.
And you got to remember, Evero was a thing for a minute.
Yeah,
he was
right.
He would have been one of these guys like a couple of years ago. He was a thing. He was doing some really cool stuff in Denver during the year he was there. But yeah, I actually I even forgot they got Christian Roseboom from the Rams. He's not like a goal beater or anything, but he's solid. Like he's better than what they had. I don't know. They do interesting scheme stuff. They have Horn's a needle mover. Brown's a needle mover. Even Bobby Brown, they signed from the Rams too, is actually a solid nose too. So competency. There's good vibes with the Panthers right now, and I'm really interested in the offense. The offensive line will be good. I mean, of course, I really like McMillan. I liked how they did this draft too, and going like, hey, we're going to get the receiver talent early, and then we'll figure out the defensive guys on day 2. And I think it broke pretty right for them in the draft. So, I'm with you on this one. That I really just do think that like they have some upside here, way better. I wish Clowney came back. Watching in some late season Clowney, he still had juice. He still had some explosive play there. So, that was maybe the one thing I would go there. But yeah, there's competency, I think, at least on the Panthers end. You feel the same way with their offense, Matt? Or are you kind of? I think we have some optimism there. Maybe it's because are you still a Jalen Coker fan?
Oh, dude, always. Yes, of course. No, I think that receiver room is really interesting. It's kind of deep. And if McMillan's the guy that he should be, he kind of completes the room. Chuba Hubbard coming off a really good year. The interior of the offensive line is good in the run and pass game, and the tackles are more so like those guys are really good in the run game. Ikwanu's still a little bit of a weakness in pass protection, but like we're kind of at a point there where that's it's more of a nitpick. I like where they're at on offense, and a lot of these additions. Like I'm glad you brought up Christian Roseboom. Like that guy flies around. He's a good solid player, and I wouldn't say I'd forgotten about just all these nice little additions they made on defense, but they're just trying to get to non-embarrassing level on that side of the ball. And right now, at least on paper, and if Evero still has the juice, like I think they can not embarrassing levels.
Yeah, I think that's a good goal. Not embarrassing. Yeah, it's almost like where the Cardinals were at like last year, kind of. Spoilers. They also, can we get a picture of Bryce Young and Cam Jackson next to each other? I want my Manute Bol, Muggsy Bogues picture, but football. I want those two next to each other. Cam Jackson's the 450-pound listed weight guy, defense tackle that the Panthers took. All right, I'll move on to my first thing. I got to make sure I got my order right. And this thing kind of sound passe, maybe a little something that's been overdone, but I think it's real. And that's tight ends. Tight ends are going to be a thing, and not just a guy or just like one guy getting used in a certain way. Groups of tight ends, the personnel groupings, tight end centric offenses are going to be a thing this year. And I know tight ends have been the biggest thing, the next big thing since Nam, and I get that, or at least the first Gulf War. But I see just a big push of multi tight end looks. And because I think the versatility has been unlocked, we're getting more tweeners, and receiving tight ends have more of a role now than they used to, because I think offensive play callers have become more creative. They've realized, we can do this with you and we can't do this with you, but we can find creative ways to make sure we only do the things we can do with you. But last year, 12 personnel, which is 2 tight ends, highest rate of 12 personnel on record since 2013, according to True Media. That's as far back as I can look it up. 22.1%. Only 3 seasons in the last decade have been above 20%. Plays with 2 or more tight ends on the field. So that's 13 personnel, 14 personnel, 22, all this stuff. 7.6% of football plays in the NFL last year featured 2 or more tight ends. That is the highest rate ever. And I can look this one back to 2002. We saw more tight ends on the field than we ever have last year in 2024. Everybody kept saying tight ends are coming, and it finally happened. We've all moved on, but tight ends are here. And there's a real reason for this. Defenses are lighter. Defenses are more comfortable being in sub, being in nickel, being in dime. So this is a way for offenses to get more beef on the field, but not just losing, and just not just pure Mercedes Lewis types or Chris Manhertz types, more Trey McBrides, more guys that are in between that could be receivers as well as blockers, more balanced players. Even and just look at the MC West as kind of the epitome of what I'm talking about here. Cardinals with their three guys, Trey McBride, Tip Ryman, Elijah Higgins, all solid players, different type of roles. 49ers have Kittle, but went and signed him, made sure to sign him, Luke Farrell from the Jaguars to a decent deal. And of course, they have Juice Jack, who's a fullback / he does everything. Rams drafted Terrence Ferguson, signed Colby Parkinson last year, still have Tyler Higbee on the roster. And even Davis Allen isn't a bad player. He's a solid, like a decent role player. And they use more 12 personnel than they have in years. Seahawks drafted Elijah Arroyo. I got that name. AJ Barner's on the roster, good blocker from Michigan. They got Noah Fant last year of the contract, but they're going to use him. Dolphins signed Pharaoh Brown, who was with the Seahawks, good blocker. They have Julian Hill. They have Jonnu Smith. Jaguars got 3 tight ends to sign to pair with Brent Strange. Bears drafted Colson Loveland to pair with Cole Kmet. Packers got Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. Commanders have Zach Ertz and John Bates. What I'm getting at, teams went from, we need 1 tight end. Now teams are going, no, we need 2 tight ends. This is going to provide more versatility for us than maybe just having 3 good receivers. We can get 3 pass catchers, but then the second tight end could be a better auxiliary player for us than that de facto third receiver. In the schematic elements of this, you got backfield looks. There's lighter defenses now, like I mentioned, more creativity happening. You got tight ends fitting up on linebackers on insert blocks, which is possible now because linebackers are 230. You couldn't do that 15 years ago. Linebackers were 255, 260. They would have sawed off every tight end trying to fit up on them. Now they can do that just because of size. You got motion at the snap of the ball. You got zebra, the Shanahan play, which is outside zone, but it puts the tight end on motion, gives him some help, and more teams are using that and actually put some twists on it. Like the Falcons have basically became like a trap block on it, whatever. But that is what my thing for 2025 is going to be. More tight ends. I think the trend is continuing. I think we got a good influx of young tight ends coming into the league, and I don't think that's going to stop even looking at next year's class. I think these receiving tight ends that used to be not have a real role unless they're a real difference maker are now finding roles. So I think there's going to be more and more tight ends. Whew. And that's I was pretty excited again at that one because every stat I kept looking at, I was like, wow, oh, there's more. Oh, wow, okay. But I just do think this is going to become more of a trend. It used to be more of a like, oh yeah, good if you can do it, like good if you can have it. But now I think it's actually like people are finding these 245-pound players that have a role on the field now. So very excited to see what happens with the tight ends, at least in 2025 and beyond.
I was about to say, it just seems like teams are investing more in them because I just looked up recent draft history. And even if you look back at like 2023, you had 9 drafted in the first 2 days of the draft. This year you had 6 drafted, but 5 of those guys came in the first 2 rounds of the draft. So there's clearly something teams are seeing. I think maybe with what we're seeing in college where these guys, they have to pick up receiving skills so fast, maybe that's an edge that maybe guys in the past didn't quite have. When you look at guys like what Warren did this year, what Colson Loveland did at Michigan, Brock Bowers at Georgia. We've seen guys come in and be pretty prolific receivers a little bit earlier than what we're seeing. So maybe they're a little bit less afraid of making that investment as they try to get a little bit heavier and defenses get lighter. It's like it almost feels like a dog chasing his tail a little bit, like we're just going to come around to the same points that we've already seen in NFL history at some point. And right now offenses are getting bigger while defenses are getting smaller, which I'm sure we've seen in the past before too.
Okay. Yeah. I'm glad that Charles went first because I think my thought might be, either stupid or a little bit too galaxy brained, maybe both. I kind of think this actually might be bad for the overall like production ceiling of tight ends. Because if you I don't know if this is true last year, but historically when there's more tight ends on the field, that actually pushes more like yards per route run and targets per route run to the wideouts, which makes some level of sense when you just think about it like schematically and coverage wise and just the players that are on the field then from a defensive side of it. But and really like if you look at it right now, there's like two teams that I would say like ran their offense through a tight end last year. One was the Raiders because like, what else are you going to do? You're going to run that
What
thing
else?
through Brock Bowers. And then the other was the Cardinals, which it kind of like goes against what I just said there, that they did have a lot of tight ends in the field, but they still pummeled targets through Trey McBride. Like, as much as people, are whining about the Marvin Harrison Jr. usage last year, they did so much cool stuff to free up who was their most productive pass catcher last year in Trey McBride. But those are like outliers. Typically, conceptually, you're just not running through the tight end as the number one read. So in a weird way, like, yeah, it's probably good for offenses overall to be more versatile, but it might actually create like less star power at the tight end position from a production standpoint, which I realize is not the only thing that we care about here, but it is at least like when we're looking for, are tight ends going to catch up to wideouts in terms of the actual annual value of their contracts or the money they're paid. This actually might make things a little bit more difficult in the long run in a weird way.
Right. It eats snaps from everybody, from other tight ends and other receivers. You know what I mean? Like actually will help some receiver production, because so many of these guys, and like the Cardinals is a great example, is that they'll get into 2 tight end looks. Tip Ryman's route runs, I'm sure, is super low because he's just locked in block. Totally. So it's like those, and as opposed to an 11 personnel look, it's like, well, I'm going 11 personnel. There's not a lot of like play action I can run out of this. Like there's some looks you can do. So it's like, okay, then that one de facto tight end is out there running the route. So I'm agreeing with you. It's just that, yeah, it's better maybe in a football sense, but then it's like you said, the star power kind of goes, it's like, it limits everybody, puts a cap on everybody because just what they get asked to do. So totally get what you're saying there.
Yeah. I remember a story came into my head it's like when Bill Belichick was the defensive coordinator of the Giants. When his father-in-law was like 3 or 4 years old. He had a game where they were playing against the Bills, and they had a game against Thurman Thomas, and Bills came out and dimed for the whole game. He's like, screw it. Like, let them run the ball 40 times with Thurman Thomas if they want to. But if they want to score, they're going to have to throw the ball at some point. But I do feel like we're getting to a point with NFL offenses now where, like, if we're going to get more tight ends, I think Matt's point makes sense. We might see a little bit of a decrease in production at times because they might just be running the ball more. Like guys like Colson Loveland and Tyler Warren, they're going to eat. But maybe your everyday run-the-mill guy who comes in around 2, you might be doing a little bit more blocking than maybe we were thinking about. But still, it is cool to see just that evolution, and you just see just a very specific physical body weight evolution. You're getting smaller, we're going to get bigger, and you're going to play the efficiency game and see which wins out at the end of the day. It's kind of fun. Yeah,
it is. I got credit coaches. Ben Johnson's one of them. I mean, but a bunch of coaches around the league have gotten so much more creative with we think just route running and all that and motion on that, but how they get used as blockers. It used to just be, hey, you're in line. I'm blocking this 280-pound D end. Good luck. Like one-on-one, you just got to take them. And now it's like, put them in motion, get them off ball, have them slam block. Like they're doing more to unlock that. So I thought we'd maybe see a little bit even more creativity last year, but it kind of plateaued. But I think it's going to proliferate more around the league, spread around the league more, as you mentioned earlier about like all those Lions coaches going around the league and some other coaches from those kind of staffs. All right, we are going to take our first break because the first points got nice and juicy, and then we'll come back with a few more of our things for 2025. All right, we are back. Now it's time for Matt's next thing for 2025. What do you got, Matt?
I think Ricky Pearsall is going to be a thing in 2025. And I mean this in like multiple senses of the word. First of all, I just think Ricky Pearsall is a good breakout candidate this year. Like if we're just doing a breakout candidate show, I think I wouldn't say he's like completely under the radar because he was a first round pick last year. And he did have his best moment in kind of like one of the brightest moments for the 49ers late in the season last year, which there wasn't very many of them, but it was that week 17 game against the Detroit Lions. But I actually think he represents something that we have talked about over the last year, but I think will be more of a talking point this year because the 49ers, fingers crossed, should actually be better than they were last year. They should have a much more normal season than they had last year. Maybe. We'll see. NFC West is going to be a tough division. I don't think by any means they're just going to moonwalk right to a Super Bowl appearance or anything, but the national media will be, I think, more focused on the Niners throughout the course of the season because I think they will at the very least be more competitive than they were last year. And that's the overall just transition of this Niners offense away from some of the kind of traditional Shanahan concepts that we think about it. We have obviously talked a lot about, because this happened during their run up to the Super Bowl, their transition away from just a straight wide zone, outside zone run game into more of like a power duo run game with Christian McCaffrey in there. But I think their passing game took big leaps last year as just a pure drop back unit. And I actually think that Pearsall, him being taken in the first round, was a signal that this was coming. And I didn't think about it at the time until actually I saw him first take the field for this team in week 7, because he got shot in the chest in August. But even in that week, sometimes
one does.
As one does, you're leading up to your NFL career getting kicked off and you get shot in the damn chest. It happens. So that is the thing that happened. Yeah. Jeez, that's hazing right there. That is what happened to Ricky Pearsall in August. So doesn't take the field to week 7, and even in week 7, like the film wasn't good on Pearsall or anything, because it's literally his first action come. And I was like, I don't want to slam him for this, but it's just the truth of it. He was clearly trying to get his feet wet there in the middle of the season after getting shot in the chest. But he's running like all these whip routes and return routes and option routes from the slot. And there's just what hasn't really been a player that's done that in this offense before. Like, it was very clear that he was drafted with a purpose and like a singular role in mind when they took him in the first round, several months before obviously the season kicked off. So, and then it wasn't really expressing itself at all in a production sense, because he also dealt with other injuries. But then I started watching him like his last 4 games of the season, not just that Lions game, but the Rams game and the Dolphins game prior to that. And he's just absolutely smoking man coverage and, just crushing guys on these kind of routes off motion, the whips and the returns and these option routes. And that was just, to me, like, oh man, like he's cooking. I think the coaching staff also started to see that. And that's why he had that really strong finish to the season. So to me, I think he is not just a good breakout candidate in his own right, but I also think he represents sort of the transition away from some of these kind of designery, gimmicky, gadgety touches that have been big in this offense, and more towards their like kind of future as a true drop back where Purdy's, sort of playing the true field general role here. So I think he's a really interesting player to just track throughout the course of the season.
And he catches everything, which is always fun. Guys that catch everything are a lot of fun. I have more points on what the evolution or what you think the 49ers offense is about to be. So let's put a pin in that, because that's going to be one of my later points to bring up. But Charles, any thoughts on Pearsall, the 49ers, or do you want to jump into your next point?
No, I just got to give Matt props, because last year we argued about Pearsall, and then I watched him at the end of the season. It's like, it's good.
I know.
I mean, it's like when we talked about him in the on the draft reaction show on the fantasy feed, you were going through something, at that time.
I'm always going through something in April.
I know.
Yeah, every April I'm going through something. I don't know what it is. Lack of sleep, Terry Fontenot terrorizing me. There's something there all the time.
Always something.
Always something there. The Falcons world. Yeah, no, he honestly, it's just like Brandon Ayuk, who was looking like a top 10 receiver, gets hurt, and I'm still feeling pretty good about their 49ers pass catchers. They trade away Deebo Samuel, and I'm like, yeah, they still got Kittle, and they got Juwan Jennings, they got Pearsall. That's still a pretty good set of players right there. So actually should be okay. Charles, what was your next thing for 2025?
This maybe is a prediction. I'm sure Twitter's going to have a lot of fun with this. But I do think that the Dolphins' offensive line in the current state is going to be the end of like their run of having a fun offense. I just don't understand how you can end up in a spot after a full offseason where Austin Jackson is starting for you. It doesn't make sense to me. Like where once Teron Armstead retires, there should be like some serious urgency to try and get this back to a spot where you have more quality starters along your offensive line. And I just don't understand how they did that. And it's not even really just beyond like, okay, your quarterback gets hurt all the time. Maybe you want people who are a little sturdier protecting him. It's also, you want to be a team that runs the ball, and a team that runs the ball well. So I don't understand like why they don't have more investments into their offensive line. James Daniels is a solid player. Jonah S. from Arizona that they drafted. We'll see what happens there. But I know I know what Austin Jackson is at this point, and we also know that Patrick Paul, we know he's most likely better suited for a right tackle role. So I just don't understand why they left that gaping void there when Teron gave them time. Like, he retired in February. To give them time to try and figure this thing out. I just don't really understand how they ended up here. And when you have an ecosystem that we've seen has been as fragile as theirs has been, you would think that you would just try to slam as many fat guys as you could onto the top of this, but they really just kind of took their time there and didn't do much. It's kind of baffling to me.
Yeah, and also even it wasn't just eye test, like numbers wise, it was terrible. Like, they're getting hit behind the line all the time, behind the line of scrimmage, I should say. Like, they didn't, obviously, guys got hurt like too and everything, but just even the offensive line, it was just like the scheme helps the offensive line so much in Shanahan offenses that when it's bad, it's like, whew, that must be really bad because we're already giving it training wheels and like helping these guys out. And the fact, even if Armstead played this year and like did not retire, I still wanted them to invest in the offensive line. It wasn't just, oh yeah, Armstead retiring and now they're screwed. It was like, no, they still needed help. I'm bullish on Paul, but I'm realistic because I still think he needs a ton of work to do with his hands, which is the same it was in college coming out of Houston. He's got really long arms, but then he like clamps guys. So he's got to really work on, just staying tight with that. But he has some talent. Okay, that's one guy that has some talent. Keeneland's is fine. I do like Aaron Brewer. I still think that was one of the best free agency signings last year. But then you got a rookie at right guard who also needs work with his hands as well. Jonah S., as you put him, Savanaia. He has issues as well with outside hands and falling on the ground. Okay, so that's two guys on the offensive line that are going to get a lot of holdings this year. They're just working through it. I know what Austin Jackson is. All right, so I feel good about the center. Not okay. You know what I mean? Like that, all the other guys are question marks to me, or just kind of like, bullish question marks, but still question marks. So I'm right there with you. As I wanted them to invest in the offensive line early. Yes, they drafted Jonah S. in the second round, but I just did think that maybe that first round pick could have gone offensive line. Maybe they double dipped at offensive line. Do think their defensive fronts can be sick. Like I really like where their defensive line's looking like with Kenneth Grand, and Phillips coming back from injury and Bradley Chubb hopefully being healthy. Like, this defensive line could be sick. But God, look at the DB room, look at the offensive line. Where are these touches going? Is Tyreek Hill like still there? Jalen Ramsey's almost certainly going to be traded if you look like. So yeah, just a lot of question marks on this team. And I thought the O-line one was one that had the clearest path to be addressed. And they just kind of like, no, we're just going to keep doing our thing. Yeah, just a odd team in Miami. But moving on to my next one. This is kind of the Packers is what inspired this one. But there's other teams doing this. And this is split backs and busy backfields. A lot of stuff's happening in the backfield in the NFL. And I don't just mean motion, which a little bit about motion, but who is in the backfield. It used to just be a running back, and then maybe you go fullback. Maybe you go on third down, you got a running back and a tight end because of pass protection. Now it's first down, you got two receivers back there. You got a running back and a receiver. You got a tight end and a receiver. And the Packers, I thought, especially once they went through that little Malik Willis sabbatical when Jordan Love got hurt, it really inspired them to do more with their little spinner series. But they led the league in receiver runs. It was mainly Jaden Reed, but they were just finding ways to get their talented players touches. And I think, again, I'm talking about creativity with play callers. What teams do this entire offseason, coaches do this entire offseason, is steal from each other. They just review and they go, oh, that worked really well. Okay, how can we use that for our guys? And I think teams are going to watch teams like the Packers and others. Bring it up. Cardinals are another one. 49ers, of course. Deebo Samuels. The Rams, always with their jet sweep guys. The Cowboys, actually, with CeeDee Lamb, did some cool things. Chiefs always. And then the Broncos with Marvin Mims did some cool things too, putting him in the backfield as well. But not just receiver runs, but getting receivers in the backfield, two tight ends in the backfield with a running back and making full house backfields. I saw the Cardinals doing that a good deal. I see the Bengals doing it a ton. The Bengals did some really cool stuff with getting the tight end in the backfield and basically being a de facto fullback. It actually really was a lot like the Mike McCarthy Packers with Aaron Rodgers. They did it a lot with Finley. But those full house looks, getting all these guys, changing the angles of pullers, defenses with the too high, with all the quarters and stuff, they have to read and react and see what you're doing. If you guys got guys in the backfield, you're changing gaps. and you can change it without doing too much on your own end on offense and being too crazy, just getting these guys in different spots. So busy backfields is my scheme thing for this year. Also, this is tied into more pistol. 2024 featured the highest rate of pistol last year ever, 8.6% league wide. It continued to trend from 2023. That's tied into this because when you're in pistol, you can kind of hybrid the backfield from gun looks and under center looks. And I think we're going to see even more creativity with that because it's working for teams. It's just a little change up. You're not going to major in it, but I do think more teams are going to start using this change up throughout the league. And it's kind of cool when you see some talented players like Mims and Jareed get touches that aren't just like little 4-yard gains. It's like first downs and explosive plays. So I see more creativity happening on the offensive end on this side. So I do think that will happen a little bit more. I just have more tight ends on the field, but I think receivers are going to get more touches as runners now and have some more stuff happening in the backfield. But all right, moving on to our next one. Matt, what's your next thing for 2025?
Yeah, next one for me is the Rams pass rush, because I think this pass rush has to like take a real significant leap for the Rams to kind of get where they need to go, because like, you know, I know they're probably the favorite to trade for Jalen Ramsey right now. I would guess so. You know, you mentioned he's tweeting out like the number 5, which it's 5 days till June 1st, which is when he can like be traded, which I guess maybe that's what he means.
That's so blatant.
What he means. Well,
God,
I mean, it might be what it might be what he means, but I mean, his jersey number is also 5, so who knows? It could be nothing, but again, could be totally nothing. I also think a team like Panthers should be involved in the Jalen Ramsey thing. I think Charles' Falcons should be involved in kind of kicking those tires as well. So I don't feel like it should just be. Well, I know who cares, but still, theoretically.
He's not.
Falcons fans are not happy with us, apparently. After they
won't be. They're never happy. So whatever. That's not new.
Compared to Jake Cutler. Compare Penix to Jake Cutler. I didn't think that was that bad.
I didn't think our Penix discussion was that offensive, but apparently it was.
I think what happened there is the allure of the rookie quarterback. It brought some of the nihilists back, but they'll be reminded it's the Falcons in September. So whatever.
There we go. That's a good point. Back to the Rams. Yeah, like as of right now, Jalen Ramsey is not on their roster currently. That is not just like a given that he's going to be playing for them. And I still think their secondary was really problematic at times last year. And I think we have the memory of what they did to Sam Darnold and the Vikings like burned into our brain because that was such an ass kicking. But by and large, this defense was not one of the better units across the NFL. And obviously, once they did get these young guys, you know, they got Braden Fisk ramped up. They got Jared Verse, who's just a monster pretty much all throughout the course of last year, but he especially ended the season really strong. You know, they add Poona Ford to the mix here. They have a lot of like good young players on that defensive line. You know, Byron Young is really good. Kobe Turner is really good. I like all these players, I think, have to take at least a half jump, if not a full leap up this coming season for this team to be what they want to be. Now, I think they can do it, but I think that this isn't like a skepticism or anything like that. It's just like it's got to get done, I think, for the Rams to be the team that they want to be, which is, I think they obviously want to be a Super Bowl contender. They're in a very short window here with like maybe year to year with Matthew Stafford, Devontae Adams, an aging receiver on the other side of it here. Like they want to win the Super Bowl this year or the next year. I think this defensive line is going to have to carry a lot of weight along with it, because I love the offense. I think it's really, really good, but I do have some questions about the defense on the other side of it here. And I think if they're going to reach those heights, like I said, all of those young players who are very good have to maybe take a half step, if not a full step up the ladder here.
Yeah, I mean, and they lost some kind of like contributing players, you know, like Michael Hoyt, you know, Brown, I mentioned just a second ago, Roseboom, guys I actually just already mentioned on the show. But you know, and again, these guys aren't world beaters, but they were contributing positive snaps, you know, for the defense. And I know, like, they got Omar Spites, undrafted free agent linebacker, who I like, but they still have Troy Reader starting at linebacker, who I don't like as much. But they get away with it, and they figure out ways to do it. But it's just one of those where, like you said, they need some step up front unless the Ramsey stuff happens, because even on the back end, it's like they do some really cool stuff. Like Shula is a really interesting defense coordinator, a guy I've circled kind of like what they especially did in the second half of the year. But it was boom or bust with the pass rush. It was like, if the pass rush did not get home, and I think we had stats talking about this when we entered the playoffs, where it was just like under 2.5 seconds, great defense. Time to throw past 3 seconds or 2.5 seconds if they didn't get home, terrible defense, terrible pass defense. Fisk can get run on a little bit. So they just have questions to answer. I also just maybe think of my kind of one thing I want to see with the Jalen Ramsey thing made me think of this, but I want to see Jalen Ramsey go on the Charles Woodson career path and move to safety. Even though he's really good still at corner and slot, I just want to see him move to safety because I think he'll be an all-pro safety if once he decides to do that. But maybe it's here. Maybe he goes to LA and that's where they use him again. They actually have some decent safety.
That's also, by the way, I like that, but I'm with you on this vision. But that's also pretty problematic that we're talking about, like. And again, we're not saying he stinks at corner, so we got to move him. We got to move him to safety right now. But he is still entering what will be his age 31 season in October. Like, is he so good that, all right, we add him to the secondary and now we're all set? I'm not sure he's at that level like he was in his prime years. Yeah,
he's an improvement, but he's not. Yeah, it's going to good as opposed to maybe that all world level. So yeah, he did have one play where Marvin Harrison Jr. caught a touchdown running away from him. Ramsey ran faster than any defender in the by miles per hour, according to Next Gen Stats. But he ran like, it was like there was Marvin Harrison Jr.'s fastest time, like 21 miles an hour, and Ramsey was like,
well, I was going to say,
faster.
I've been told Marvin Harrison Jr. is the slowest receiver in the league, so that's pretty tough.
Slow. Doesn't break tackles. He's slow. Drops everything. He's terrible. Trade him for. I want him in Dynasty. I know people that are in my Dynasty leagues listening to this. Come on. I got an offer out there for him. Come on. Charles, what is your next thing for 2025?
I want to see, I guess, the expansion of Kansas City's offense. You're going to get Rashee Rice back. Because last year, it was just barely good enough for them to do what they needed to do as long as Patrick Mahomes is your quarterback. But I think we saw towards the end of the season that, especially in the Super Bowl, where they're just totally outclassed, but you get to the end of the season, you've kind of been living like 4 yards at a time. And that's really tough to sustain over, for them, what became a 20-game season that just ended in absolute disaster. You're going to get Rashee Rice back. He lost Joe Thuney, though, so we'll see how Kingsley Sumataya plays at left guard. I don't know, man. He was really bad when he played last year, but hopefully moving him inside will get him up to speed a little bit faster. But I think there was a reason why they bailed on that experiment so fast last year, and why they didn't really even try to go back to it all that much. Jalen Moore at left tackle from the 49ers, I think that's a pretty big wild card. So we'll see. But I think if you can just get Rashee Rice back and Xavier Worthy takes that next step, you can at least get back to playing some form of explosive offense. Because I think, even with someone as good as Mahomes as your quarterback, you don't want to be living how they were last year. You don't want to be like how we were doing last year, right? We're looking at these Kareem Hunt runs 50% success rate, 19 carries, 67 yards, and
just a whole bunch of jabs.
A whole bunch of jabs. Yeah. And then they walked into a team that could hit you in the mouth with a haymaker over and over and over again. And it wasn't quite good enough. And I just think when Patrick Mahomes is your quarterback, you got to be trying to just open it up a little bit more. And maybe they thought Xavier Worthy was going to be a little bit more ready as a real wide receiver threat than he was the start last season. He was just kind of a gadget play guy, Nicole 2.0 is what that season kind of started as. And he played a little bit better towards the end. But as it was currently constructed, I just don't think it's tenable. And I guess I just don't think it's right to be playing 3 yards in a cloud of dust football when your quarterback is Patrick Mahomes. So I would just like to see them try to expand, try to stay a little bit healthier, and hopefully even one of, I forget the Utah State receiver they drafted this year. If he can come in, Jalen Royals. I don't, not the biggest fan of his game, but maybe in the third wide receiver role with Rashee Rice, with Xavier Worthy, whatever Travis Kelce still has left in the tank, that can be a good spot for them, for him this year. But man, they just got to be more explosive than they were on offense, because I think if you were going to do if you were going to sign up for another 17 games of what they went through last year, I don't know if they would get back to the Super Bowl, that's the bar for this team, to get to the Super Bowl every year. And I don't think they can do it again as they were constructed.
As long as Mahomes is healthy, it's basically Final Four or bust. I know it's not fair, but that's kind of how it feels. I mean,
that's literally what it's
was the Ichiro. That's what it is. I know. I mean, literally, yes. I mean, you're right. It was the Ichiro offense. It was just all singles. It was just 4-yard gain, 5-yard gain, 4-yard gain, 5-yard gain. All right, nice little thing. And I'm curious. The explosive passes have just kind of keep dwindling, and how they get there. And now it's almost become like a Chuck Knobloch thing, where it's in their head about completing these, and they can't get it done. And I'm curious if I ever was able to talk to these coaches and be like, is that because you guys don't think you can block it up, or a guy's not getting open? Is it both? Is it a lack of faith in that? Because you have to block it up to throw it deep like you do. And I just don't think they ever trusted those tackles and to do that, and justifiably so. But now it kind of led to Andy Reid's worst tendencies, which is going full-blown Mickey Mouse offense. Full-blown, I mean, old school, late 90s West Coast with his, the dancing and the red zone stuff. Like, this is the frustrations with Andy Reid for a long time, was what we saw last year. This is what people used to say about the Eagles' offenses in the aughts. Like, I remember as a kid, and then now I saw it last year, and I'm like, oh, where's Freddie Mitchell at? I remember this offense. It's like, where's another 4-yard swing route? I remember these offenses. So it's like, let's get back to 2018. I know 2018 is just never going to happen again. I mean, obviously, but let's get back to that. Third down,
there's
block it up,
ground.
And chuck.
There's a middle ground.
A middle ground.
Yeah,
please.
Absolutely is. Yeah, Matt, what do you even think about the receiver hierarchy right now? Like, how do you think this kind of even shakes out? Say Rashee Rice comes back 90%. We'll just put it at 90%. How do you think that kind of it breaks down and looks?
Okay. I'm going to kind of contradict a little bit of what I said in my first segment here, because the things that are things, because I do think they're not one of these teams. Right. Totally. They're not one of these teams of the Rams or the 49ers or the Lions, where they're so condensed where they do blur the lines, but they're certainly above the middle ground of the league, I would just feel so much better about this offense if they just had one true X receiver, one guy who could win against press man coverage, throw him about, just handle the boundary stuff, because all of these guys are players that take some level of role catering. Rashee Rice is a very, very productive player, but he's a very, very productive player in a singular role. He's I think he can develop into very specific. I think he can develop into an Amon-Ra St. Brown type of player, where he's getting a lot of these layup looks from the slot and he's winning after the catch, and he's a primary zone beater. And it's unfair to say we didn't see that last year, because we only saw him for basically 3.1 games, because he got hurt after 4 plays in the Chargers game in week 4. But that development needs to happen. And then also, Xavier Worthy is a guy that also needs a lot of role catering, because he's 165 pounds. He can't handle those real boundary routes either. So there's already some kind of overlap and kind of how you have to cater to those two guys. And then your third receiver is Marquise Brown, who's another guy that ideally you want to do some role catering for and things of that nature. And even Jalen Royals, I think optimally deployed Rashee Rice, so it's a weird receiver.
Is best
even Kelsey.
Yeah,
exactly. So there's not one guy who just kind of settles this room, and now we have, because again, Rice production wise really, really good, but it is in hyper specific ways. And they still have Juju Smith-Schuster on the roster, who was the king of this 4 or 5 years ago, that needed to be deployed in this way. So you got to go down to UDFA Elijah Badger to find a guy that I think is an actual X receiver, and he's an undrafted free agent that's probably not going to play a snap for this team.
Oh. Justin Ross is still on the roster.
For now,
I think I have one share somewhere.
I literally just cut him off my dynasty roster last week. I have enough.
Wow.
I'm not going to
swear he was talented.
That's some patience.
I know. But I think the last point I have on this offense was, I think when you start listing off the wide receivers and then you deduct Rashee Rice from it, it's man, it's really hard to live in the dink and dunk pass world when we don't have anyone who can really break a tackle like that. And I think
that's
even though Rashee is, like you said, type of specific role, at least you have some size and some speed and physicality that they just didn't have at all last year. So I don't know. 100%. It's just a mess. It's a mess. But you got 15 under center, so be better. Just be better.
Right.
Sure.
They're missing in the weirdest way. They're just missing like a chunk of the field they can't attack right now because they don't have anyone big enough to attack over the middle or crafty enough to attack over the middle, route running or size wise. It was Kelsey. I mean, and you could set your clock to it, but now it just feels like they just can't attack certain areas because of who they had. It's crossers, bubbles, bombs. Crossers, bubbles, bombs. That's like their offense right now, passing game, which is some of those bombs have to be completed to make that work. And right now, recently, they haven't been able to do that. So it's like the same issue. I feel like I've been talking about this freaking team for 3 years now. So we'll see how it goes. Like you said, Charles, they got 15. At least I got that. All right, moving on to my next one. This, continuing with your 49er point, Matt Harmon, is something I've just been really, it's caught my eye. And I think it's where it's going to go. And it's what's old is new again kind of thing. This is under center dropbacks. This is straight no play action. We are getting under center. We are dropping back 5 steps and we are throwing it. We are dropping back 7 steps and we are throwing it. And the irony of football, and this is why I love, as all of us have been around this game for at least a decade now, you see the cycles of these things. When the emergence of play action and boots and zone running, who's the names that we keep saying? Shanahan, Kubiak, McVay. Shanahan, Kubiak, McVay. Who are the guys leading the charge of under center dropbacks with no play action? Shanahan, Kubiak, and McVay, which I just think is so funny that they are the ones that are leading the charge. To show a difference of how much football has changed in just even my lifetime. Thank you, True Media, for having these numbers. In 2002, this is when the NFL expanded to 32 teams. That's why, if anyone's curious, that's why I always bring up 2002. There was 11,367 early down, that's first and second down, under center drop back passes. That includes play action. In 2024, there were 2,855. 11,000 to 2,000. There was 22.2 under center drop back passes in 2002. There's 5 per game in 2024. So just to show how much this game has changed. That's because there's more shotgun, there's more pistol, there's more play action, there's more boots. There's just a little bit of different stuff that's happening, especially shotgun passes. We see 1 under center drop back on first and second down without any play action per game. That's both teams combined in last year. In 2019, which is as far back as I can look, there were 2 per game. So we've already cut in half. But there was a slight uptick in 2024 from 2023. 49ers led the charge, 2.6 of these per game. They averaged 9 yards per play on these dropbacks. The Saints called 2 per game with Kubiak. I'm about to make a cut up on all these, so don't you guys worry. If anyone's curious, I'll have a video element of all this as well on Twitter or in Blue Sky. Texans, the Lions, and Vikings round up the top 5, and then the Rams, Browns, and Cowboys were the other teams that used it. All kind of makes sense based on their, the scheme philosophy and even the quarterbacks. Averaged 7.5 yards per play. But this is what I thought was so interesting and why I think this has become more of a thing. Defenses are so in tune on what offenses are doing. This is exactly what you brought up, Matt. Charles, you brought up too, about everybody defenses adapt. So boots have become just way less efficient. They're still decent, but less efficient. But under center drop back passes with no play action since 2019. 0.05 EPA per dropback, 49.3% success rate, 6.6 net yards per attempt. Early down shotgun passes with no play action since 2019. 6.3 net yards per attempt, so it's lower. 0.02 EPA per dropback, so half. And then 45% success rate, so a drop of 4% success rate. That's significant. That's going from the above average to a great passing game. Pistol, same exact metrics basically as a shotgun. So I just think that more teams are going to watch what the 49ers did, watch what the Rams did with Stafford in doing this, because they kind of did it more in the second half of the year. Watch what the Lions did with Goff, watch what the Vikings did with Darnold, and actually Darnold's probably going to do more of it with Kubiak in Seattle. But I just think more teams are going to look to old school stuff because defenses have adapted to the new school stuff so well. And I think this is going to be another, I'm not saying they're going to run it 6 times a game, 10 times a game, more 2 to 3 times a game. Teams will just sprinkle it in just a little bit, just to change it up. Play action used to be the changeup. Now it's the fastball. Now I think this is the changeup where, hey, they're under center. Defenses go, okay, they're either going to run the ball or run play action. Oh my God, he's dropping straight back. And then you'll see linebackers, without even play action, linebackers freeze because they don't know what to do. They're like, that's a step we haven't practiced against, reading what the quarterback's doing. And just all the routes that come off of it as well. Watching the 49ers cut up when I put together was really interesting to see how they're getting to it. But you can see defenses kind of heads pop with the window dressing that the 49ers plopped on there. So I just think more and more teams will start to look to this. I just don't think it'll shy away. And it's just funny to me that, I mean, this is what you were taught in 2005. Like, this is day one install old school quarterback stuff. And now it's become what you're going to be taught again in 2025. So again, going full circle with these things, but under center dropbacks, I think, again, what's old is new again in the NFL. It's just time is a flat circle. And honestly, I could just update these points every 8 years and just keep repeating these points every 8 years, and they'll just keep coming back and we'll be okay. But is this what you're kind of referring to too, Matt, with the Brock Purdy straight drop back? Everybody's live on the passing scheme too. That's another element, is everybody's live. All 5 guys. On play action, somebody has to stay and block. All 5 guys are live. If you have Christian McCaffrey and Kittle and all these guys, let's make them all live. Let's make them all viable routes. So is this kind of what you're referring to too? Because I do see it happening.
Yeah, and I think it really highlights a lot of what have become Purdy's strengths as a player, which is I think he's a good post snap processor, because you have to be if you're going to do this stuff. And he's still a very, very, very good anticipatory passer, which I think, again, you're going to have to be, because like you said, you have all of these eligibles out there, and not everything's just going to be straight static, or like, all right, this is my one read. I got to, make sure, like, when I hit the drop off play action, like, I get it to this guy, because I think it just it puts more power on the player's hands. And like, obviously, you're, from a coaching staff perspective, you're still constructing these things, you're still putting it all together, but it is a lot of like, you gotta, and it's obviously very easy to go back to the McVay, Goff to Stafford sort of transition there, even though it is funny that Goff is doing a lot of this stuff in Detroit as well. A lot of like layers of irony in that whole thing. But,
I know, isn't it? I know that. Yeah, it's been funny.
Yeah, it is weird. Like it's not like as clean as it.
The guys that were play action merchants are now the drop back merchants. It's kind of
right. The analogy would be so much cleaner if like Jared Goff had just flunked out in Detroit or whatever. But it doesn't work that way, which again is good, because Goff is good. The Lions offense is good. But it's the, hey, I have more faith in this guy. I can put more on his plate. And it just is, you're playing more big boy football, in my opinion, but with this stuff out there, both on the receiver and the quarterback perspective. So yeah, I do think the Niners are going to be very instructive of this as we continue to kind of watch this development. But I'm with you, Nate. I think we see a lot more of it for other teams as well.
Yeah, and which are everybody getting out and putting onus in the player's hands. It's that play action is usually 2 or 3 man routes. So that's why whenever you hear the term, it's a training wheels offense, that's what you're making it easier on the reads. I only have to worry about 2.5 routes, 2 routes, and then the check down. That's basically it. And that's why it's good day 1, day 2, day 3 things to teach quarterbacks and offensive line as well. But now, like you said, it's just put more onus on the quarterbacks to go, all right, I got 5 guys out there. Now I got to figure out, okay, which is the best read.
And I think also this is just, again, the Rams offense is fresh in my brain because I just worked on Puka Nacua, and it's striking how much, like, because they're able to get all these guys out in the route, how much they're able to put defenses and specific defenders in conflict when they're trying to get the ball to one player. Like, how many times I watch like Puka run a big in-breaking route, and there's just like 2, like I joke about the sacrificial X receiver. There's like 2 sacrificial flat routes where there's just occupying eyes over here, and he just becomes wide open, and he's in space and can run with the ball in his hands. So you're able to do I think actually it does, when we're talking from a coaching perspective, like, and the routes concepts and the routes working off of each other and like high lows and things like that, you're able to do a lot more when you're able to trust your quarterback to do this.
Yep. Yeah, I know that. Flat controller is what we call those routes. So that's exactly right. They control the flat defender. Actually, because Matt and I just went back and forth there, we're going to last one here of lightning round. Charles, I'll go to you. What's your last thing that you think will be a thing in 2025?
The Steelers, please just sign Aaron Rodgers so you have a chance to not look like you have for the past couple of years. That's all I'm saying. I'm curious to see that's my thing. I guess if I was going to expand it, I guess I was going to be a little bit curious about how the Arthur Smith and Aaron Rodgers marriage would mesh. But they left themselves where they don't have a choice. So just get it done, please, and let's just see what's next. Because is Aaron Rodgers and Arthur Smith the cleanest fit? No, but it's better than Mason Rudolph and Arthur Smith. So let's do that.
It's kind of the Wario version of that Arthur Smith, Matt Ryan offense,
Yeah.
Like it's the Wario version of that. It's like it's got the evil mustache on, the evil goatee on the offense right there. So no, I Steelers are a very big curiosity for me. I'm very optimistic about the run game, no matter who's behind center, but all the other aspects of that team, yes, big curiosity, a big thing in 2025. Matt, what about you? What was your last thing for 2025?
Cowboys offensive line. They're sort of similar to my thoughts about the Rams pass rush. Yeah, it's like I think they're a lot of good players here. I think Cooper Beebe is a good player. I think Tyler Smith's obviously a really, really good player. Of course, Tyler Guyton, that's like kind of a proving spot. They add Tyler Booker here. But I do feel like Beebe and Smith are guys that they're good players. And I think I'm happy with where they are, but they probably need to take like a half step jump for this offensive line to become what I think they want it to be, which is I think they want it to be a real weapon, to the point that when they had that great offensive line in the early Dak, this honestly were more so the Zeke days. It was, hey, oh, that's nice that Zeke's back there. They could throw any goofball running back behind that offensive line and have a great run game. They're about to try to do that this year. They got Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, and a 5th-round rookie in Jaden Blue. So if they're gonna be the offense that I think they want to be, which is I think they want to build off the run game, they want to build off a lot of these power concepts, and they probably want to tighten up their formations and be more condensed, and they want to run some play action off of this and stuff. If they want to do that, I think this offensive line has to be a weapon. I think it can be, and because they don't have a bell, they don't have anything close to a bell cow back there, they're going to want that offensive line to be a real needle mover on its own for that running game to be as productive as they need it to be.
They got a bell calf in Jaden Blue. He's tiny. I don't know. I was trying to find something there. No, but every successful Cowboys run has been built around their offensive line. The 90s, Tom Landry years. But the 90s was built around the Nate Newton, Larry Allen. just ridiculous offensive line. Go back and watch 90s Cowboys film. It's so much fun to watch because, yes, they had the triplets and Emmitt Smith, Troy Aikman, and Michael Irvin, but the O-line was one of the best offensive lines you'll ever see, ever history. And then 2010's Cowboys, like you brought up, same exact thing. Smith, Zach Martin, Travis Frederick. Just real legit dudes that they invest in. That's one thing I'll always appreciate with Jerry Jones is he knows the offensive line is important. But I just do think this is version 3 of maybe the Jerry Jones offensive line rebuilds, I guess, that he's trying to go through here. So I like this one. I almost brought this one up because Cowboys are a cool team. I don't know. I'm kind of becoming more keen on them again in the weirdest way. I kind of casted them off to the netherworld last year, and now I'm bringing them back. I'm interested in them. All right, I'll get into my last one, and this is me just being a joke of myself because it's been a while since I've talked about the Cardinals. Let's talk about the Cardinals defense. I do think this will be a thing finally. The offense tapered off on me a little bit last year. Let's switch to the defense. They were 10th in EPA per play over the second half of the season. They dealt with a ton of injuries, especially up front. So that hodgepodge unit that does funky stuff even had to be more hodgepodgey and funky. They ranked 4th in adjusted games lost on defense last year. They started to get more healthy. They traded for Baron Browning. And then in the back half of the season, they were 8th in pressure rate, sandwiched between the Vikings and Broncos, 5th in sacks, 3rd in EPA per pass, 8th in dropback success rate. So it wasn't just boom bust. They were 3rd in pressure rate when they brought the blitz, 5 or more. But that's what's cool about the Cardinals. It's not that they're just blitz happy all the time. It's they're funky all the time with some blitzes thrown in. Ranked 4th in drop 8 rate, where they drop 8 defenders in coverage. They're top 10 in cover 0, top 10 in cover 2. The downside of all that funkiness, though, I've just mentioned all the passing stats. They were horrid against the run. And because when you want to do all that shifting and moving after the snap, offenses, especially good ones, are just going to road grade you like the Seahawks did on their second matchup against each other. They're 31st in explosive run rate allowed, but 7th in run stuff rate allowed, which is good. So it's boom bust.
Boom bust.
Yeah. So that's the stat right there. That's what you have to look at with them. Ton of funky stuff. They have a division with McVay, Shanahan, Kubiak now in it that does so much motion. They do all that stuff with Budda Baker to they hold the pen last. Buda Baker can insert how they want him to insert, which I think is a really cool thing. They can get away with it because Baker's so good. I'm curious if other defenses look at that. But I just want to talk about the new faces they added. I mentioned Browning. Browning, after he joined the Cardinals in week 10 at the trade deadline, he ranked 6th in the NFL in pressure rate. 6th. Chop Robinson, Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith, Micah Parsons, Chase Young, Baron Browning. He also ranked 7th in stop rate, which is a good tackle stat. Darius Robinson, their first-round pick. I don't think he'll be more than a goodish role player. He wasn't healthy for most of the year. They drafted Walter Nolan in the first round. They get guys like B.J. Ojulari, who missed his second year with an ACL injury, but had a nice, solid rookie year. They have Zaven Collins still, who kind of epitomizes this kind of chameleon defense. They still have Mac Williams. They drafted Jordan Birch, Walter Nolan, who I think this is a great defense for him because of just the vets they signed, Dalvin Thompson, Calais Campbell, Josh Sweat, but also he's all-world potential. Can't really, rely on it right now. But how he gets unlocked is when he gets to be put on the move, slants, twists, all that stuff. That's what this defense does. So I just think they went and had some beef with Tomlinson, Campbell, Sweat a little bit too on the outside, some real talent on top of the funkiness. On the back end, they got Will Johnson in the second round because of injuries. Buda Baker, I think, of course, is a star. Jalen Thompson's a fine player. Max Melton had some nice moments as a rookie. Garrett Wilson is a fantastic, and I would even say Pro Bowl caliber defensive back now. Versatile, athletic, good tackler, good ball skills, super, super smart player. But I don't know, man. This defense was interesting last year. I said Garrett Williams, who I want to praise right now, is really good. Garrett Williams. I was like, why does it sound weird? They were funky and interesting, and now I think it's interesting in a good way. And I think they could easily be, not easily, but I think they'll be a top 10 defense this year. I know we'll do a top 10 offense, top 10 defense pod. Spoilers, this will probably be my 10th ranked defense when I do that list, because I do think on top of the funkiness and scheme stuff they add some talent. Yeah, this is my thing for 2025. And also I got to keep my Joe DiMaggio hitting streak of mentioning the Cardinals on every single show alive.
Yeah.
I told you I'd be a character.
They got a little like glass cannon to them, we're gonna get you or we're gonna get got. So I think they needed to add some more players to that. Because last year, like you said, I thought the 31st for explosive runs with 7th stuff rate. We're getting you or you're getting us. No in between. We
need more normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Enough A's and F's. Get some B's and C's and we'll be okay. We are going to take our last break and we'll get to some mailbag questions to wrap this show up. All right, we are back. Get to a mailbag question or two here. This one is from Mark P. Again, thank you guys so much for sending these in. Really, really appreciate it. But from Mark P. I understand that 1 weak link on the O-line makes a poor O-line, typically. Given that, does it make sense to use slightly less draft capital and free agent money on the O-line, instead shoot for B-level talent for a decent leak-free O-line? Or is it important to use a ton of capital on the line at the expense of other positions on the field? Charles, any thoughts on this?
I think the way the Titans went about this is a great answer to this question. Because they did a little bit of a mix of both, right? You had Skoronski and J.C. Latham, but then you just kind of stuff the rest of it with like B-level guys like Dan Moore, Kevin Zeitler. Man, I forget the center. Wow, my brain's just on the fritz today.
Lloyd Cushenberry.
Lloyd Cushenberry. I was like, not Brewer. Like Brewer's in Miami. That's not right.
Yeah.
But yeah, but Cushenberry.
2 random Brewer matches, 1 show.
Right. But you have the first round talent, and then you just stuff it with guys who can play around them and hope that those guys that you drafted turn into something. It's really hard to draft have an A across the offensive line. Like, unless you're going to be Jerry Jones and just draft someone in the first round every year and hit on all your picks on the offensive line, then you're probably not going to have an A+ like across the board, but you don't need that. Like, if you just have B guys, that's a lot better than where most teams are doing it. And I think, as long as I guess maybe the way you should look at it is as long as you don't have too many Fs or Ds, you should be able to pass it along. Now, I think some teams, they probably overestimate, like we were talking about Miami earlier, what a D or an F looks like for their specific team. But I do think probably if you just smash it with a bunch of B and C guys, you probably end up having like a B line when you compare it to everybody else. It's like any other position that's the sum of its parts. Your weak link's going to get you killed, so you need to make sure your worst player is not too far off from your best player.
I see it kind of happening now, and I think everyone, the cool kid line in NBA fandom or NBA analysis right now is the weak link theory. About now, it's about who's your worst player on the field. Hey, there's 5 basketball players on the field. How many offensive linemen are there? 5. How many DBs are typically on the field? 5. Wow. There's something to this, huh? But no, I'm with you, Chuck, that I think it's pretty impossible to build a top 12 offensive line without a 1 or 2 first rounders on there. It's just very, very hard because of globe theory. There's only so many talented 320 pounders, and generally you have to take them in the top 20 picks, top 25 picks, unless you're the Rams, which is just their own thing. Undrafted free agent, a left tackle, second rounder, 6th rounder at center, traded right guard, second rounder at right tackle. Like, the Rams can get away with it. They have Sean McVay. The Eagles, even with Jeff Stoutland, who's a great offensive line coach, they still invest in it with some first rounders, or at least just always taking picks. I think my dad's theory was you have to take one every year, meaning not in the first round, but he meant like a top 120 pick, like a first 4 rounds. You have to take a guy every year, because one day you don't, and also now you don't have a right guard when a guy gets hurt, or you don't have a third center, you don't have a guy that can play right tackle, yada, yada, yada. But I think the weak link theory is where I just get back to, is that you have to address it and have to have some studs up there, but you just have to fill it out in different ways. So I don't know if that's an in-between answer. I just think it's very, very hard unless you have to invest, but it's just not like what the investment is changes, and the math changes based on who you have, but you have to address it every single year, every single offseason, because it can become a weakness like that and totally cripple your entire team. So I would say my first step before I even drafted anybody is find the best offensive line coach and pay him as much as my coordinator, and just go. And that would be my first step. and also go like, do you have any offensive coordinator or head coach ambition? No. Okay. You're hired. And you got a key to the building. That would be my first step.
People have asked me, like, why does some Jeff Stoutland go somewhere from the Eagles? I'm like, dude, he's probably making a load of money. He's really good. Yeah. Why would he leave?
We're talking about him.
He doesn't have to answer like questions about, what is it? You see this guy's social media post? What do you think about this? Or this guy's not. You drafted this player, blah, blah. You don't have to like answer any of that stuff. Yeah, coaching definitely is a big part of it too. But I just think, by the way, my thought on this is like, we just overestimate, like, we took this 3rd rounder, like, we'll be good. Maybe, I don't know about that. Like, you still got to spend premium draft capital on these guys. Like, just the odds and the math are, the higher you draft these guys, the more you have to pay them in the open market, the better odds are that they're going to be a good player. So I think you can't get away from. I'm also, on the weak link theory thing, but I think that you are increasing your odds of not having a weak link if you invest a lot of resources, like premium draft capital in the position.
Every investment, it's just a bet. And I think that's what people have to understand. You take a guy number 1, or say he's a really good prospect. You're not saying, oh my God, he's going to be the best player ever at his position. You're saying he has more likelihood to be good or great or excellent, yada, yada, and less likelihood to bust. That's the thinking of prospects and what you're investing in and everything. So that's why it's an investment. I know this is weird to think, but sometimes stock market goes down. I know some people don't want to hear that, but sometimes the stocks go down. That's an investment. Some investments turn out bad. Ask a lot of players about their car washes. I'm going to go last question here. You like that one? Last question here, and we'll wrap this show up. I'm going to go with, this is from Minget Krosky. Why doesn't Zac Taylor get mentioned with other prominent offensive minds in the game? Having Joe Burrow on your team should eliminate Taylor from getting more credit. Matt, thoughts?
Yeah, well, look, I think that the second part of the statement is correct. Like having Joe Burrow on your team shouldn't eliminate Taylor from getting more credit. Like that's the truth with anyone. Like we try to we never want to admit in football that both things can be true. Like Andy Reid can be a great offensive play caller and a great offensive mind, and Patrick Mahomes can be a great quarterback. You know, Joe Brady's a good ascending offense coordinator, and Josh Allen is the man. You know, like but. So it's not that, but I think actually like Joe Burrow's the key here. And I actually, it's funny, we bring it all the way back around to condensed formations. Like everything that like, thanks to Nate Tice for sending me this, all of the teams in like the top 9-ish are all guys off the Shanahan tree that have like the lowest average length of the formation, like the most condensed. The only outlier is Zac Taylor, all the way up there in like Seahawks land, because that's the way the quarterback wants to play. And I actually think that like that, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing for Taylor. I think it's a good thing to cater to your quarterback. Like I think he gets almost too much flack. Yeah, you have to. Like it should be a collaborative process. It would be ridiculous if he's like, well, this is what we did in Los Angeles, Joe, and like we're gonna do that with you. Like we're gonna turn you into Jared Goff, because then this whole thing would have gone up in flames. It wouldn't work out. So I give Taylor a lot of credit for not, being overly zealous about his own approaches. And we know that he can, and probably somewhere inside of himself wants to do those things, because we saw him do it with Jake Browning when he was on the field, like push all the easy buttons. And, then it almost becomes this like weird cycle for him where he doesn't get credit because he doesn't do those things. But it's like, oh, well, you did it then. Why don't you do it with your good quarterback? Well, because this good quarterback doesn't want to do it. So I do actually, like in the spirit of the question, I actually sometimes do feel bad for Zac Taylor, because he gets in this like cycle of criticism. I don't feel that bad for him, Charles. Relax. I don't feel that bad for him, but he does get into a weird cycle of these things where the offense isn't creative enough, but it's the reason it's not creative is because the most important person in your building doesn't want it to be.
Yeah, I remember. I think Zac Taylor deserves some credit for getting better, but I still don't know if I view him as like a real needle mover as a play caller.
Yeah, that's fair.
So because I remember when he got hired,
comparable to like Kellen Moore, like kind of like that kind of level, like like B plus, somewhere around there.
Yeah, somewhere around there, B minus, But
somebody has to be in the middle of the class, somebody
has to be the big bell.
Right. And because I remember when Zac got hired, coming off of when he was with the Rams. If you just, I don't know why I remember this so vividly, but if you go back and watch like some of the preseason, Zac Taylor's first preseason with Cincinnati, it was like he like had Sean McVay's brain, like, yes, copy and pasted it. Like he had Sean McVay's brain in like a little like glass tube next to him. Hey, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? Because I remember that was the year where like it and this is not an exaggeration. The Jared Goff year where 90% of his under center passes were play action. Literally, it was like 92 to 93% in that range. That's what Zac Taylor tried to do his first year. They were like, oh wait, this is not working. We don't have the infrastructure to run an offense like that simple. So to his credit, I do think he's evolved past that, but I do think a lot of his evolving that says, Jamar, T, take the keys, go, touchdown.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much, how much more sophisticated this and that, but like if they're comfortable working with them, that speaks a lot to his at least ability to be able to relate to them and to be comfortable with them. Because I think you see it across sports now, especially in the NFL and the NBA more so, like the coach's ability to relate to the star players is just as important as about anything else that goes on, because you don't want a situation where Joe Burrow wants out or Jamar Chase wants out or T. Higgins wants out. So as long as those guys are cool with him and they're scoring points, I would imagine he's going to be the head coach there for a long time. And I think that has merit, even if I don't think he's like the savviest X in those guys. Clearly he's doing something right because those guys have all bought in. They're leaders on the team. They bought into his message. And that is just as important as a lot of other things that coaches get credit for.
Yeah, even before I get into like the scheme stuff of like was why Taylor's earned more respect from me than maybe year one. It's funny. My first note I wrote down on my little whiteboard here was, year one McVay clone. So the fact you
Yes.
brought that up, I was like, I remember it. It was like, it was all bunch formations. It was
disgusting.
all
It
11
was awful.
personnel. Trying to use like Tyler Boyd as Cooper Kupp. Like, like I remember all of it.
Tough scene.
Yeah. But no, this is a great point, Charles, you just brought up though. Like there's more to coaching than just the scheme stuff. It's getting guys to buy in. It's getting guys on the right page. The organizational stuff, who you hire is a big deal. And coaches have input on that. It all depends on the team. The Eagles is how we show, but everybody has this kind of their own thing. So I think that reflects on Taylor. And also this just might be this is more just the human element part, the DeMar Hamlin game. How Zac Taylor acted during that, like earned a ton of respect from me. Like just how he was like really took control of the situation. It was like, no, it's not right to play and all those things as the opposing coach. I don't know. That earned a lot of respect. It's always going to stick in my head about that. But even so, scheme stuff, I consider more in that B plus tier is just every year they've added layers. Every time I feel like the Bengals offense is going to plateau, they're doing something that frustrates me. Early on, it was Sean McVay clone. And then it became the offense was super siloed on their Super Bowl run. If we were under center on second down, we're running the ball, we're running zone only. All right. And then we're in the gun, we're throwing the ball. No play action. Nothing was tied in. Everything's siloed. The Falcons are going through this issue right now. So I'm curious how they solve it. But the 2024 last year was the full house stuff. I brought it up, how they're using, okay, we're a spread offense. How do we run the ball? Okay, we lost we lost Tyler Boyd and we got we got a receiver that is going to get kicked off every team he's ever been on because he doesn't know where to line up. All right, Mike Gesicki's our slot receiver now. Guess what? It works. Like, I don't know. He's adapted better than if you just kind of pay attention, they've been so relevant that you watch a lot of Bengals games. It's like just these little tweaks. The 2022, the layers that they added, we're so siloed. Okay, we're going to be heavy shotgun. Learn how to run the ball out of the shotgun. And then they add layers to that. Let's add double moves to our base pass plays that Joe wants to run over and over and over. You're adding layers to the stuff that your players are comfortable with. So I think that's good coaching. I think that's also accepting, or balancing your own ego and what you want to do and understanding what your players are. Again, good coaching. And he just seems like a fine guy. So I'm going to give him, I've never met him, but I'll just, that gives me a little check there. Seems like a fine guy.
Yeah.
So that gives the tips over that, or tips it over. Never says anything arrogant. Maybe he talks about his pickleball game. He says he's really good at pickleball. So maybe that's the only really arrogant thing I've heard out of him. So I don't know. There we go, Zac Taylor. Well, praise for Zac Taylor on May 28th. How about that? All right, but we are going to be some praise, some shrugs of the shoulders, some shrugs of the shoulders. Yeah. Meh. But we are closing it out today. We'll be back next Wednesday. I am Nate Tice. You can find me at Nate_Tice. That is Charles McDonald. You can find him at 4Verse, and that's Matt Harmon. You can find him at Matt Harmon or Matt Harmon_BYB. Send in more mailbag questions. Hopefully get into those. Send them into football301mailbag at yahoosports.com or leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Any review, we really appreciate it. So please keep those coming as well. Spotify too works. YouTube, thumbs up works as well. Subscribe to us, follow us, rate us. Like I said, watch us on YouTube on the Yahoo Sports YouTube channel. Thanks to everyone behind the scenes. Thank you to everyone for listening. See you guys next week.